Welcome back to my channel Limelight Leaks. Please share and subscribe and hit the bell icon for latest updates. Smokey Yunick wasn't just a regular mechanic. He was a super smart guy who found ways around NASCAR's rules. Some people said he was a cheater, while others thought he was a genius. But NASCAR never forgot the 13 tricks he pulled off. Back in 1967, Smokey Yunick brought out what looked like a normal Chevy Chevelle. When you looked at it, it seemed perfect from the dealership, exactly what NASCAR wanted. But Smokey didn't care about just looking right. He had secretly made the car smaller. Using his skills, he made the body panels a tiny bit smaller, dropped the roof just a little, changed the windshield angle, and made it narrower. None of these changes were easy to see by themselves, but when you put them all together, they turned the Chevelle into a sleeker, faster, more wind-cutting machine. Back then, inspectors used tape measures, yardsticks, and their gut feelings to check cars. Smokey knew what they could and couldn't catch. He built the Chevelle so that every measurement, intersections, meets, just barely stayed inside what NASCAR said was okay. To the officials, it looked legal. To other teams, something seemed fishy. And on the track, nobody could touch it. Drivers promised the car cut through the air differently, gliding on the straight parts with a speed no regular stock car should have had. When people found out what Smokey had done, NASCAR freaked out. They banned the Chevelle almost right away and changed the body measurement rules to be more exact. But it was too late. The story of Smokey's outlaw Chevelle was born. Fans said it was the smartest cheat in NASCAR history. Officials called it terrible. But even they had to say one thing. Smokey Yunick had just built what many still call the most illegal car the sport had ever seen. When NASCAR put a limit on gas tanks at 22 gallons, most teams just accepted it. Smokey Yunick didn't. Instead of making the tank bigger, he turned the fuel line into a secret storage space. By stretching it to more than 11 feet long and making it trailed enough to hold almost 5 extra gallons, Smokey created a second gas tank that looked like just regular plumbing. It was so simple, so sneaky, and so effective that officials didn't even see it at first. On race day, this trick gave Smokey's cars a huge advantage. While other racers had to stop for fuel, his car became NASCAR. Legend, inspectors, sure they had finally caught him, pulled the gas tank out of his Chevelle and put it aside as proof. Without the tank, they thought the car couldn't run. Problem solved. But Smokey had one last trick to play. He got into the driver's seat, turned the key, and started the engine. To the shock of everyone watching, the Chevelle came to life. Smokey put it in gear and drove the car away without a gas tank in it. The car had enough fuel stored in that 11-foot line to keep running, making the inspectors look silly. Smokey even made it worse. According to the story, he leaned out the window and said, "Better put that tank back, there's still 9 gallons in the line." Whether he really said it or not, the story spread everywhere. Smokey had embarrassed the officials, showing the world that NASCAR's rulebook was no match for his creativity. On paper, every NASCAR frame in the 1960s was supposed to be the same on both sides. But Smokey Yunick realized, being the truthful, same on both sides wasn't important, especially on oval tracks where cars spent almost every second turning left. So he designed what became known as the offset chassis. By secretly shifting the frame to one side, Smokey moved the car's weight around, pushing the tires harder into the track on left turns. The result was huge: more grip, more stability, and faster cornering. To someone just looking, the car seemed normal. To Smokey's drivers, it handled like magic. Other teams complained, but NASCAR couldn't point to a rule that clearly banned it. Once again, Smokey was living in the gray area. Eventually, officials rewrote the chassis rules to close the loophole. But not before Smokey's crooked cars got a reputation for sticking to the track in ways that others simply couldn't. It was another example of his genius. Smokey didn't just build fast cars, he built smarter ones. And every time NASCAR thought they had him, he found another blind spot in the rulebook. Roll cages were made for one purpose: keeping the driver safe. But in Smokey Yunick's hands, they became something way more sneaky. Smokey figured out that if he used slightly bigger tubing, he could turn parts of the roll cage into hidden fuel storage. On the outside, it looked like normal safety equipment. Inside, it carried extra gallons of fuel that no inspector could see. This trick gave his cars extra range and less time in the pits, which in racing often meant the difference between winning and losing. The smart part was how normal it looked. Inspectors saw steel tubes welded into the frame. Smokey saw free space waiting to be filled. He hid his trick behind safety equipment, and for a while, nobody caught on. When NASCAR finally did, people were really mad. Safety equipment was sacred. Using it as a cheat felt to many like crossing an invisible line. But to Smokey, it was just another loophole. "If they didn't say I couldn't, then I can," he shrugged. NASCAR responded by making stricter rules, saying exactly what size tubing had to be, and making illegal anything that could hold fuel. Smokey had lost the loophole, but won the legend. Stock car racing was all about airflow, and Smokey knew aerodynamics before most teams could even spell the word. He found out that by secretly raising the roof by tiny bits or lowering the floor pan ever so slightly, he could change the car's entire shape. The result? Less drag, better stability, and a car that cheated the wind while looking completely stock. The genius was in how subtle it was. To inspectors, the cars passed every measurement. To drivers, they felt smoother, faster, and more planted at high speeds. Other teams often suspected something was wrong, but Smokey's changes were so small, just millimeters sometimes, that proving them was nearly impossible. This approach showed Smokey's obsession with the details no one else thought about. While others fought for raw horsepower, he hunted for invisible gains in sheet metal and body shape. NASCAR eventually cracked down with stricter templates and body inspections, but by then, Smokey had proven a truth that still matters in racing today. Aerodynamics win races just as much as engines. The Holley carburetor was standard equipment in NASCAR, and on the surface, every team ran the same part. But Smokey knew where to, and once again, NASCAR was left rushing to close a loophole it hadn't realized was there. Smokey's carb tricks show his bigger, harassed, genius. He didn't always chase the big flashy hacks. Sometimes he found speed in places so small most people never bothered to look. And in racing, those tiny edges often made all the difference. In NASCAR, every pound mattered. Smokey Yunick knew that a lighter car went faster, handled better, and ran cooler tires over long distances. But NASCAR's rules locked down fuel tank size at 22 gallons. Nothing more, nothing less. Smokey couldn't change how much it held. What he could change was the weight. So he built thin-walled fuel tanks. To the naked eye, they looked just like the standard equipment. Inspectors measured the size and signed off without thinking twice. But Smokey's tanks were made from lighter material, cutting precious pounds without losing volume. On the track, those pounds meant faster lap times, quicker pit exits, and an edge over everyone else. The smart part of the move was how invisible it was. Other teams could scream foul, but unless NASCAR cut open the tank, they couldn't. Smith, prove anything. And Smokey loved that razor's edge. Legal by measurement, illegal by intent. Eventually, officials caught on when they realized Smokey had messed with something as standard as a fuel tank. NASCAR cracked down, forcing weight minimums and materials restrictions. But by then, Smokey had already cashed in on the advantage and once again embarrassed the rulemakers. Smokey's obsession with airflow was like an art form. He knew that an engine's performance wasn't just about what went in, but how smoothly air moved through the car. He began trying out vents, ducts, and hidden passages that disguised themselves as ordinary features but secretly changed how air moved around. Some ducts fed cooler air to the engine, reducing overheating and squeezing out horsepower. Others subtly managed airflow around the car's body, reducing drag and turbulence. He even disguised vents as decorative features, things inspectors dismissed as cosmetic, but every single change was designed to shave fractions of a second per lap. Immigration detectors couldn't figure it out. Smokey's cars seemed to run cooler, last longer, and cut cleaner through the air. On hot days when engines boiled and slowed, his cars kept charging. Drivers felt the difference even if they couldn't see it. Inspectors once again were left chasing ghosts. This constant focus on air manipulation was decades ahead of its time. Modern NASCAR cars are built with wind tunnels and computer simulations. Smokey was doing it with gut instinct, tin snips and a chalk line. Among Smokey Yunick's creations, one stood out as mythical, the so-called golden car. Other teams swore it was the slickest, most finely tuned piece of machinery ever to touch asphalt. It wasn't just fast, it looked too perfect. The bodywork hugged tighter. The panels lined up flawlessly. Even the way it sat on the track seemed unnatural, like it had been built in a wind tunnel years before NASCAR even thought of one. Nobody could prove exactly what Smokey did to it. Some suspected hidden panel shifts. Others whispered about secret ducting or changed wheelbase geometry. Smokey never told. All he'd admit was that the car lived in the greyest of the grey areas, using every vague line of the rulebook. NASCAR hated it. Other teams despised it. But fans loved it. To them, the golden car wasn't cheating, it was art. It showed everything Smokey represented, a willingness to outthink, outbuild and outlast the system. In the end, NASCAR shut it down, but not before the golden car became legend, a symbol of the outlaw spirit that defined Smokey Yunick. Even decades later, teams whisper about it as if it were racing's holy grail, the car that proved innovation could be more dangerous than horsepower itself. In NASCAR, ballast, the extra weight used to balance a car, was supposed to be secured and set. But Smokey Yunick didn't see lead bricks. He saw opportunities. He tried out hiding ballast in unusual places, tucked inside frame rails disguised as structural parts or mounted in ways that gave him more control over how the car handled. Wasn't cheating, it was strategy. To NASCAR, it was chaos. Every driver knows tires win races. Smokey Yunick knew they could also lose them, so he pushed the limits like no one else. One of his boldest tricks involved running dangerously low tire pressures. Lower pressure meant more rubber on the track and better grip, especially in corners. It gave Smokey's cars a massive advantage when others were sliding loose. But the downside was just as dramatic. Tires could overheat, buckle, or even blow apart. Smokey accepted the risk, gambling that the extra speed would pay off before disaster struck. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but it always kept competitors on edge. Even more clever, Smokey reportedly found ways to hide his true pressures from inspectors. By using heated tires or sneaky inflation techniques, he could disguise the readings long enough to pass inspection. Once the race began, his drivers were rolling on setups nobody else dared to try. NASCAR eventually made rules about tire minimums, forcing teams into safer ranges. But Smokey's daring experiments proved one thing. In racing, grip is gold. And sometimes you have to risk everything to find it. For all the fuel tricks, hidden cages, and aerodynamic wizardry, Smokey Yunick's greatest weapon wasn't mechanical. It was psychological. He didn't just beat cars, he beat people. Smokey studied NASCAR inspectors as closely as he studied engines. He knew their habits, their blind spots, even their tempers. If officials focused on one area, say the carburetor, Smokey would distract them with something else. He'd argue, crack jokes, or even stage fake cheats just to throw them off the scent of the real one. Some stories claim he built cars with multiple cheats layered in, betting that once inspectors found the first trick, they'd stop looking. More often than not, he was right. Smokey also used his reputation as a weapon. Officials expected him to cheat, so he used that expectation against them, planting suspicion where none existed. While his real tricks passed unnoticed, he turned inspection into a chess match, and more often than not, he was 3 moves ahead. In the end, Smokey's ultimate trick wasn't the shrunk Chevelle or the 11-foot fuel line. It was proving that rules are only as strong as the people enforcing them. He didn't just build cars that bent the rulebook, he built legends that bent people's minds, bent their minds.